All right, welcome to the Temple of Geek Podcast. My name is Monica, and today we are joined by Victoria Malé to discuss Marvel Studios' latest series, Moon Knight. If this is your first time tuning into the Temple of Geek Podcast, welcome. The Temple of Geek Podcast has been around since 2012 and is hosted by a variety of geeks from the Temple of Geek team. Here we cover all manner of geek and pop culture, news, and events. To our returning listeners, thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate you being here. Welcome back to the podcast, Victoria.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm kind of in a podcast retirement, but if anyone could coax me out, it's you and the latest Marvel show. So I'm thrilled to be on here and to make my hopefully glorious return.
Well, could you please introduce yourself to our listeners and just kind of tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm in Los Angeles based. I like the term I've coined is creative professional. I work in the film industry both as a junior development executive for a major franchise, and then I'm also a writer. And then I met this lovely lady, Monica, through a podcast with a friend of mine that we had for about 3 years called Your Biggest Fangirl. We're no longer doing it, but you can still look it up on most podcast platforms. So that's just a little bit about me. And then I'm a huge Marvel stan. And I'm just a big nerd. I love history. I love musicals, but Marvel definitely reigns supreme. And I love a good DC moment as well, but I'm definitely a Marvel girl through and through.
Absolutely, me too. And I love DC, but Marvel just be doing things, and it's just
Yes, I think also my favorite movie of all time is the original Spider-Man, and that was like my intro into the whole comic book lore. So I think, yeah, I naturally love Marvel, or have the natural affinity.
and I don't have a lot of, comic book background when it comes to Moon Knight or most, the Marvel properties. I'm more of a movie and television person. And I don't know if this is true for you, but it's true for me. I enjoy watching the Marvel series without doing too much digging into the comics because having no context I feel like is a really great way to like experience like what Marvel's trying to show us, at least in the MCU, the cinematic universe. I feel like I really appreciate just kind of like getting to know these characters through the films, and I feel like it makes me less likely to be like, oh well, they should have done this or they should have done that. So is that true for you at all, or?
Yeah, I think in a way there's less opportunity for heartbreak, right? If you don't have any expectations. I know I had that with Spider-Man. Like in No Way Home, I was really hoping they'd reference a certain character that I love, and they didn't. I was like, it's fine. But I think also it's good to go into. I think specifically Moon Knight is a character who's good to go in rather cold on. I did listen to prep. You need to meet them actually. My dear friends Jason and Ashley are the hosts of Geek History Lesson, and they
Oh
did
yes, I'm familiar with Geek History Lesson.
yes, they did a fabulous episode. I mean, pretty much all their episodes are fabulous, but they did a great primer for Moon Knight. And both those two, and Oscar Isaac himself has said in interviews that like Moon Knight's history is bonkers. It's all over the place. He's been, writers have brought all these different aspects to the character. So I think what I love about this series is that they're going in and they're just kind of consolidating and streamlining it and updating a lot of things, especially, with the whole, because the dissociative identity disorder is a major aspect of this character. And so I think they're doing a really great job. Or I like that I don't know too much about Mark, and I can just kind of go in and let the show be my intro and my guide into this character.
Absolutely. And, I think because the comics have been around for so long, some of the stuff is a little dated,
Yeah.
doesn't really translate well. So it's kind of hard to have this, story from the comics perfectly, move over and translate into sometimes it just doesn't translate well.
Yeah, and that's the beauty again as a writer of, and like someone who works on film, of adaptation, because also certain things might be super cool in comics, but they don't. It's really hard to do them on screen. And I also think a lot. One of the few things I knew about Moon Knight before watching the series is he's kind of Marvel's Batman. Like Stephen Grant, I think in the comics is like a suave billionaire. Um, And I think Stephen Grant in the show is quite suave, but in his own special Stephen with a V way.
Even with
But
the
my God, I'm like, yes, you have Oscar Isaac's face, whatever you say, BB. And I love a Brit, so I'm just like into it. But I like also, like, I think also given that Batman is such a big thing, we just had the new Batman movie. I think, there's certain things that they want to differentiate. And I think it's fun. Like, I think you can love both. Like, you can love certain comic books representations of characters, and then you can also love how they do it on screen. I don't think we have to necessarily compare them.
I
They
think
can
that's fair.
coexist.
I think that's fine. So let's talk about the first 4 episodes because oh
I need to let down. I take a nap right here.
my god. So I went in with very little expectations, but this show absolutely the first 4 episodes blew my mind. I It was nothing like I imagined, and I had no context, but I couldn't have imagined this. Like there was no way that I would have imagined this.
Yeah.
Um, I guess give me first of all your overall take on the first 4 episodes. What was like your just overall take on it?
I mean, I'll break the microphone. It's just like it's I just one of my favorite like memes is I don't know if you've ever seen the Ariana Grande God is a Woman music video, but in the middle of that music video they just cut to a bunch of gophers screaming like very shrilly, and that is me. I think it's funny you say what we were just talking about with comics because and like knowing characters really well, because it's funny like I think I've noticed that the shows I enjoy most so far of the Disney Plus shows are the shows that I have the least amount of knowledge on or that I have the least amount of expectations. Like WandaVision was like, all right, whatever. Like, and then was sobbing in the last episode. Whereas with Loki, like that's a character I've read a bunch of comics on, and I've read like even a novelization about his character, and I know his character from the mythology, and I know all of Tom Hiddleston's work, and I maybe interviewed to work on that show, and allegedly, um,
Allegedly.
allegedly, no, I did. I didn't get hired, but I had such high hopes for that character, and then when they did their own thing with him, and they kind of did they took they made some bold choices. I was like, no, no, I just wanted to see him time travel and be like a hot asshole to people. Like I no, but I think this show, since I didn't know much about Moon Knight, I was like, all right. And I honestly, what got me was the I love Kid Cudi and I love that song Day and Night. And when they used it in the trailer, I'm like, I'm in. Um, so yeah, I think my general reactions have been just my expectations have been succeeded. I think it's so brilliantly done. I've been recommending it to everyone. I also think it's such a great show to get people who aren't necessarily watching the MCU stuff, because there's no really like hard links. Like you don't need to have seen X, Y, and Z to see it. But I think it's brilliantly done. I think Oscar Isaac, I'm like just baffled by him. I think the moment that really stands out to me acting wise is in episode 3, where he switches. He's in the desert and he breaks off the car mirror, and Mark gives Steven the body, and you don't have the effect because usually they denote that transition with like them looking up and like the eyes glow or whatever. And the fact he just did it, I was like, this is not okay. Like this is no, it is okay. It's brilliant. But I was like, you're not allowed to be this handsome and this talented. Like that's kind of illegal. But I think it's been brilliant. I think I'm really enjoying it. I think it was interesting. I was reading critique on the 3rd episode, and I understand. I think to me the Egyptians gods, the Aeneid. Sorry, I think Aeneid because I'm a huge Greek mythology buff. But I feel they're kind of weird. And they could be a little more active other than Khonshu. I think again, this is just me word vomiting. I think Khonshu is a really interesting character. I love his design. He's so imposing. I think overall, I'm also loving, especially in this 4th episode, them using horror tropes and all that. Like it definitely is and I hope we see this in Doctor Strange as well. Like we get more of a feeling of horror, like the horror film. And I think they're doing it just enough. Like they're not, again, because this is a show on Disney Plus, they're not scaring the bejesus out of any of us, but they're like building in those like tropes that or devices you use to build tension, and I think it's done really well. And I am mostly neurotypical person, so I don't really want to speak to necessarily how they're portraying Stephen's dissociative identity disorder, but from what I read, it looks like they're doing it quite authentically, and I think not exploitatively. So yeah, I'm just like here. I'm here along for the ride, and I need to know what happens next. Because I also my other critique is at the end of I don't know. I oops, I just hit the mic. My other critique is how this last episode, episode 4, ended. I don't know. This is just a me thing. I hate, I hate when it was all in his head, and I'm like, nah, no, and it was so action packed up to then. So I'm very curious to see where we go next. So yes, that's my stream of consciousness and Moon Knight thoughts.
Yeah, and I feel like I had a lot of the same thoughts that you just described right now. I think that this really just showcases what an amazing actor Oscar Isaac is. The way he plays against himself is absolutely amazing. Like just switching from one to the other, the very like distinct way. Obviously, there's the British accent versus the American accent, but it's not just that. It's the way he moves, the way
Yeah,
he runs as Mark Spector versus the way he runs as Steven, with the V. And, just like all these little subtle things, even the way his hair is,
yeah,
and they did a really great job of just like helping the audience understand who's at the wheel, you know?
yes,
And I just couldn't believe the range in Oscar Isaac. And I understand he's a talented actor. We've seen him in so many other things, but I think this is like one long reel of just what Oscar Isaac can do.
yeah,
Um, and I always really liked him as Poe in Star Wars because he was so funny. I just thought he was so funny. Like I was like, wow, this is like the comic relief that we all needed, in these Star Wars films. And then when you see him here, like he's so funny as Steven. And
yes,
and even like the way he screams at the end of episode 4, when this huge like hippo shows up, like those
yes,
screams had me dying. If you just look at their faces, I kept replaying that scene. It was so freaking hilarious and so
yes,
believable. And I really, really enjoy the way that they have been showing everything happening through Steven's eyes. So we're just as much as at a loss as an audience as Steven is. Steven doesn't know what's going on, neither do we. And we're
yes,
finding out along with him. We know a little bit of what's going on with Harrow in the background, but really, unless Steven is there, we're not seeing what's going on. So this is the audience being just as clueless as Steven is. And so I thought that was a really great choice as far as the way that they filmed that. And I think it's shown a lot of truth. Like you said, we're neurotypical people. We can't really speak to, the DID. But I think it does give us a very like kind of an insight into like what he's feeling and the stress that he's feeling when he's going through all of these things. That one scene, I think is in the second episode, where he tells himself, I'm going to turn myself in. Hopefully they're going to
mhm,
pump me up with enough drugs that I don't hear the voices in my head
yeah,
and things like that. And just
yeah,
like, the struggle of like the memories of what he saw, and what he's seen Mark do, and the blood ever. Just can you just imagine waking up with blood all over your hands and just uh,
no, and you're
it,
driving a truck, like what?
right, that whole episode was just incredible, the way they were showing Steven being able to break through. And I was just blown away with just how they did it, how confused he was. But us as the audience were just as confused because we're like, wait, what just happened? Wait, what happened? Like, what is going on? And I thought that was a really great choice. I thought it was a really great way of showing us how confusing it is for the individual themselves, because
Yes,
it it creates, at least for us who couldn't possibly imagine, it gives us a little bit of like empathy towards what they're feeling.
yeah, yeah, in an
And then
authentic way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then the Moon Knight comics have a history of, mental health themes, and the filmmakers, I know they brought on Dr. Paul Puri. He's a board certified psychiatrist who is an assistant clinical professor at UCLA, and he was the former president of the UCLA Psychiatric Clinical Faculty Association. So he consulted on the show. So they had an actual expert on the show, and not just consulting with like filmmakers, but also with the actors and speaking to them. So that all of this was done in a very sensitive light. Like you said, it wasn't exploitive. They weren't trying to kind of make a joke out of it or use it as like some kind of punchline or just something to move the story along. This really was what, Mark Spector or Stephen Grant or whoever he is dealing with.
Jake, I'm like, where are you?
Oh, so let's talk about that.
I know we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. But yeah, no, I love that, and I think that's how you have to do it, right? If you're not gonna, I think there's also in Hollywood there's this big discussion now, and I think the shift is starting to happen where you have to cast authentically. You cannot cast cis actors to play someone trans. Like, obviously, you cannot have people pretend to be ethnicities that they're not. And I think if you're gonna cast, and also it's like frowned upon even now to cast, a neurotypical person to play someone who's neurodivergent. And I'm like, well, if you're not gonna do that, then yeah, you need to have an expert and you need to, do your due diligence. Because the other thing I love about Moon Knight and Oscar Isaac's portrayal of I think the correct term is a system, referring to like the collective identity or collective alters, is he's like, it's a superpower. Like, isn't it amazing how after trauma, the mind can fracture itself to protect itself? And so I think it's really interesting to how they're reframing it and not necessarily portraying DID as like almost like this is not the right term, but like as a major, it's an inhibitor, but it doesn't mean your life is over. And I think if we're going to think about the end of episode 4, I think that's kind of the typical way we think of someone who has a serious mental illness, is that they're just sedated and they're confined and they're, pumped with drugs and these doctors and they're restrained. And it's just so interesting that I hope this helps shift the conversation about mental health, and it's specifically about dissociative identity disorder, just showing that it's something that can be understood and hopefully worked through. Again, I don't have dissociative identity disorder. I don't personally know anyone who does, but I think it's just showing. I think it's giving a broader idea of what living with a mental illness is like, rather than just like one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Right, right. And
So
hopefully this will shift not only like um, the perception in Hollywood and more representation and more inclusivity and just more being more authentic, but also the shift in our society in general, and hopefully it removes some of the stigma around mental health, because once you see it on television and you can understand it a little bit more, there's more empathy, there's more discussion and discourse around it, and that can only be a good thing, if
yeah,
especially if it's done right. So
I think what I was trying to say is I love that Mark, he's the hero of the story, he's not the victim. And I remember seeing Sybil in school growing up, and that's how I learned about dissociative identity disorder. And obviously, Sally Field does an amazing job. The movie is a product of its time. But I think it's great. Like, yeah, I just think it could be so easy to have this like gratuitous sense of um, pity and kind of dumping on Mark's character, and just not showing the breadth of the experience, only the darkness of this disorder, rather than all the different shades and the ups and downs and the light and the dark. So I love that, and I think you're right. I really hope it shifts stigma as well.
and so what one thing too that I kind of want to talk about was this Khonshu, god of vengeance, this
Mm-hmm.
god that walks among us but needs these avatars to actually do his bidding and stuff. And so like one of the things that I guess I'm really curious about, and hopefully they'll tackle this, or they'll explain this in the series, is why he chose Mark, right? And then he had previously chosen Ethan Hawke's character,
Arthur.
Arthur Harrow.
Yeah.
And so, like, why is he choosing these people? Also, what business is it of his as a god? Like, why are you here? Why are you doing these things? Like, why do you feel the need to, like, come down to Earth? Because they're not from Earth. They're from some pocket dimension and things like that, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I want this character, Khonshu, is very interesting, and I want to know more about him and why he's meddling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point because he has thoughts. uh, and I think I remember from the third episode, it's that I think the Egyptian gods used to walk among the earth, and then the humans stopped believing in them, so they were like, I'm head out," and they just go to what I think is in now in the MCU called the Overvoid. And in a way, I'm not trying to like be a Marvel apologist, but maybe that's because that scene in episode 3 where they're like, yeah, yeah, whatever you say, Arthur Harrow. Oh, this man's crazy. Okay, yeah, whatever, Khonshu. No, he's fine. Let him go. And but I also can see maybe that they really don't care about the humans anymore. And they're like, yeah, whatever. This is kind of like you caused a freaking eclipse, so we have to come and hear you out. But I think they don't trust Khonshu to begin with, so I think that's super interesting, and I think it's also interesting too. This just came to me how both Mark slash Steven and Khonshu are kind of seen as unreliable narrators or unreliable like sources. Like they can't really be trusted. Whether it's Steven and Mark trusting themselves and Khonshu being trusted by the rest of the Egyptian gods. So I think that's super interesting, and I think that's been a really interesting, fun and entertaining part of the show is that you don't know what's real and you don't know exactly like what's going on and because we have an unreliable narrator, and then that's only I think compounded by the fact he's being driven by this, shall we say, amoral or shady moral Birdman. So there's a lot going on.
I'm also curious to see what'll happen with how it will eventually tie into the MCU, because this is a great, like, you don't need a lot of context for other
Yeah.
things, but it has a lot of Eternal vibes to me, because there's
Mm-hmm.
a scene in Eternals where Gilgamesh talks about having fought alongside Odin. And obviously, we
Mm-hmm.
know, like, that, from the Thor movies and everything, that Odin was once on Earth, and, the Vikings would worship them as gods and things like that. So, you know, I want to see this tie-in of like where possibly like where the Eternals may
Yeah.
meet. Like if the Eternals were around for so long, they must have come up come upon these like Egyptian gods, or Odin,
Right.
for example, and things
Right.
like that. So I really want to see where it ties in, and also with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The Ten Rings have been around forever. My 9-year-old is convinced that the Ten Rings came from the Eternals, because there was 10 Eternals, and
Mm.
they have the rings, and the Eternals have been here forever. So my kid is convinced that that's
Hot
all tied
takes.
in. So I don't know. I'm wondering where where Moon Knight will tie in to the
Yeah.
MCU eventually, and
Yes.
how. And there's been a lot of speculation where I don't really kind of buy into this speculation, but there has been a lot of talk about how maybe these different personalities, Mark and then Stephen Grant, are like
Mm.
somehow tied into the multiverse, of madness, and will somehow tie into WandaVision, and maybe these are different personalities or variants or stuff. I am hoping it's not, because I think it's important to like be authentic to the dissociative identity disorder,
Mhm.
and that this is him and not just a bunch of versions of him
Yeah.
merged into one.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see when Moon Knight will actually tie into the MCU, because there's been like little to no talk of the MCU.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. I am obsessed with the new Rockstars channel and all their Marvel breakdowns. Like Eric Voss and MT are my gods, my Marvel gods. And I think it's really interesting because I know they clocked in episode 3 how Gaspar Ulliel's character, or RIP, um, mentioned when he was talking to Layla, he mentioned Madripoor, which
Oh
is
yeah, yeah, I did catch that. Yeah,
which is where obviously we know the
Sharon
power broker
Carter. It
Sharon
was
Carter deals out of. And also like she deals with like stolen art and fakes and stuff, and then obviously this character is dealing with stuff on the black market and like antiques and relics from antiquity. So I think that's super interesting. I was a little disappointed because I know they were theorizing that maybe, I think at one point Kang was an Egyptian pharaoh, like Rama. He was like Rama At or something. I'm butchering the name. Don't come for me, Marvel stands. But I was really hoping that that's whose tomb it would be that Steven found. He's like, I'm looking at the tomb of. I'm like, the Kang dude. And he's like, Alexander the Great. I was like, shit. And I was like, darn it. And I think that's interesting. I think also something else that they were saying that seemed super interesting to me, given that we just came off of Eternals and we're going into Thor Love and Thunder, is Gore the God Butcher. And I think he's from the same realm as where the Egyptian gods are hanging out right now. And I think I am paraphrasing what these guys said. This is not an independent and original thought, but they're saying that he doesn't like that the gods don't help the humans enough. And that's kind of why he's like, well, I'm just going to get rid of you. So I think that's really interesting too. And I want to see that come into play. And maybe even though his peers reject him, Khonshu is trying his best. And is his method and like code of ethics great? No. But I don't know if we give him points for hashtag trying or quote
Hashtag
unquote
trying.
trying. Because he does deal out vengeance, and I think also we see this very interesting like difference in philosophies discussed in episode 2, where it's interesting what Khonshu deals out, like, or what he thinks vengeance is, and who he thinks should be quote unquote punished, or who he should unleash Moon Knight on. Whereas, contrasted with Amit and Harrow's cult and their beliefs that like we need to, nip all this in the bud. And then Steven is like, wait, you can't, it's like the baby Hitler thing. Like you can't like kill someone before they've done anything wrong or something that they might do. Also, the other thing I love about Steven, and just circling back to what you said about he's like the audience's avatar or way in, is I just love too how he just has these moments. He kind of says what we're all thinking.
Yes.
Anyway, like I love how he's like how in episode 2, Harrow's like, I don't want to use this. And he's like, then don't. And
I
I
know,
love,
yeah, why are you doing this?
I know. And then I love in the 3rd episode, in the middle of the fight, where he's like, we could just need to chill the F out. And then I just loved him being like almost vomiting at blood. Like it's just, he feels so much more relatable than these characters. And like, yes, there's still the suspension of disbelief, but it's just a grand old time. And when he's reaching into Alexander's, he's like, Mr. Great, I'm sorry. I'm like, oh god, can I have 2 shows, one of Mark Spector and one of Stephen? Like I honestly, like, just even animate it. I just want like Stephen Grant's adventures through antiquity, because I'd live.
I think I think it's really interesting too when talking about like the different philosophies and stuff, is that not everybody, nobody thinks they're the bad guys, right? And so it
Mm-hmm.
kind of gives me like the Killmonger vibes. Like
Yeah,
Killmonger wasn't necessarily wrong, but his
yeah,
execution was really bad, right?
yeah,
And and so like there's these gray areas. Like even if you think about Thanos, right? Like
mm-hmm.
Thanos had, I guess, good intentions, but
Yeah.
like I think Ethan Hawke said this, hell is riddled with good intentions or
Yeah,
whatever,
the road
right?
to hell is paved with good intentions. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, everybody's just kind of really thinks that they're doing what's best. And so
yeah,
there's a couple moments when you're just like, okay, well, so if Arthur was Hera was the avatar for Khonshu originally. Why is he not? What's going
yeah.
on? Like, what happened? There's still like a lot of questions and a lot of
True.
speculations that's not answered yet.
I think it's interesting. I don't know necessarily why he left Harrow, but I think it seems like what I've pieced together and what I know from Geek History Lesson and New Rock Stars is I think Khonshu, he likes an easy target. He likes to shoot a fish in a barrel. So just because I think Mark was and like what we learned in episode 4 is he said his partner turned on him and shot him. And I don't know if I think that's Duchamp who we saw like a missed call from in episode 1. Just going on my very cursory comic knowledge, or I don't know, is it another alter? Who knows? But I think Conchu was desperate, Mark was desperate, and Conchu saw a way in. And I think that's why. And I think also Mark he's done some bad things, but I think he has a stronger moral compass. So he's like, yeah, well, this is how you're going to atone for your sins. And Mark's like, okay. And he's like, I think he's on the brink of life and death. So I don't think that was mulled over much.
So then there's this possibility of this third personality, right? Jake,
Yes.
right? And we saw a glimpse of it. I think it's in the second or third episode where at
Third.
first he was like, that wasn't me. And so
Yeah.
neither Mark or Steven are taking responsibility for for the damage that's been done in this episode,
Yeah.
right?
He's even
And
bloodier.
then,
He's even like gnarlier than Mark.
yeah, which is a lot already.
Yeah, which is like mucho.
And so then we see in this episode 4, like the coffin shaking, and there's like,
Yes. At the
yeah,
end.
so there's
The mental
one
hospital.
more, like somebody trying to break out, and
It's like,
I
let him out!
can you imagine 3 Oscar Isaacs?
I know exactly. No, that is precisely why. I'm like, no, I want a third. If I can get a third, I want a third.
But it's just it's interesting to see. I'm sure we'll see him in episode 5. Is like we'll see
Knock on
this,
wood, fingers crossed.
in episode 5. But there's just so much going on. I just really want to pave into that and start finding out what's going on with that. I think that it'll be interesting to finally. So he's been shot by Harrow,
Yes,
and he's falling
allegedly.
back, and you think possibly he's died, and then suddenly we see that like he's in some kind of hospital room, and for a second as the audience you're like, wait, was he just crazy all the time and like
Yeah,
imagining these things, but as soon as you see it, everybody's in white and everything's perfectly clear.
yeah,
And if you've ever been in any kind of medical facility, nothing is all in white and nothing is all perfectly like, cleaned, or there's always like some kind of like it
yes,
doesn't look real. And so I was like,
yes.
okay, this is where he's like trapped in his own mind, or maybe this is where they're showing where he's trapped or he's trying to break out.
Oh no, keep going because I
Okay,
just
I was like,
I,
wait, what happened?
I just googled something and I'm just like, okay, but keep talking. Also, time out. I'm gonna plug in my computer really
Oh
quick.
yeah,
So
yeah. Go ahead,
okay,
go.
keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. I can hear you through the headphones.
It's cool. Oh, wait a second.
Okay, break. Tech
I want
break.
to remember where my thoughts were.
Okay, here we go. Okay.
Okay,
Keep going.
so we see him, in this facility, and it looks like Harrow is his, psychologist, his therapist. He's somebody there trying to help him and trying to be there for him. And you see all the things like his cane and things, and you can start to think, oh, okay, well maybe he just made this up, or this is where he's
Yeah,
living. It looks like he's created this Stephen Grant persona from some television show or film that he's seen, and
yeah,
that Layla is just another patient in there. But it doesn't seem real because everything's white. And all of a sudden, obviously, as we go through and he meets himself, and like that moment when they hug and they're so happy, it made me so happy. And I was like,
me too.
it was so great. But that's when I realized, okay, he's somewhere in his mind. He's about to die, and his mind
Yeah,
is processing it. And this is how they're showing us that he's processing everything.
I think you're on the right track. I hope you're on the right track because yeah, when he wakes up in the mental hospital and he's like, and it's like very Ariana Grande, all in my head. It's all in my head, which is one of my favorite songs, and it's very good for angsting. Hot tip. But again, I think I just narratively don't like that. And I was like, oh, come on. And I think because I'm enjoying the adventure aspect of it so much, I'm like, this is hot. Like, I'm into it. I like the weird love triangle. It's not weird, but I love the love triangle. Again, I was just enjoying the sets and the production value. And again, I'm a mythology nerd, so I'm just loving all the, because I don't know the Egyptian, like, gods that well, and I'm just having a grand old time. And I'm like, no, like stop, don't, no, like and then, but it's interesting when you say something about protection, or it's like he's in a part of his mind, maybe to process all of this. So, we see the hippo goddess at the end, and I just Googled hippo Egyptian god, and what comes up, like the first result from Wikipedia is that's the goddess Tawaret. I'm sorry, I'm butchering that name. But she is, her hand rests on the saw sign, a hieroglyph that means protection. So maybe this is, and like the fact she's there, hopefully this is like another realm or pocket dimension or place, unspecified place in Steven/Mark's mind that is like protecting them from what's actually going on and helping them sort things out. Because yeah, and there was like and I think also it gets more and more surreal the longer we're in the mental hospital, and all like the all white, it does quite, this is a term I learned in college, it also, if two terms actually, I'm just going to drop them here to pretend I'm smart. um it feels, it's like the sense of the uncanny, like there's something not quite right, even though yes it could all be in his head, it just, there's something off, right? And like the mental hospital feels like a liminal space, like it's kind of suspended from time and a real sense of place. So I think, and there's all these little hints like, okay, that's where you got the Beetle, and that's where you got Stephen Grant, and there's Layla, and there's this, and then there's Harrow and his cane. But then once he starts, I think once he reunites with Steven, I was like, okay, wait, we're back in. And once they meet Tawaret, you're like, okay, okay, okay. Like, and I'm just, honestly, I wish this was 8 to 10 episodes instead of 6. I need more time. I need more multiple Oscar Isaacs.
I think we will get it in episode 5. I think we will finally meet Jake in episode
I
5.
hope so. I really wanted him to wake up as Jake in episode 4, but whatever. It's fine.
And then I also want to talk about Layla,
Yes.
because so Khonshu seems keen on making her his next avatar. So what
Yeah.
I want to know is like why suddenly Layla, right? Like why her? And
Yeah.
not because she's not qualified to be
Yeah.
like this badass, but like why would he go to the wife of his ex avatar? Like
Yeah.
what are the grounds for picking these people to be your avatars, right?
Yeah.
And then what does he hope to gain? Like, other than just, is he just hoping she's gonna go take out a bunch of people? Like what is his game?
My theories are, one, I think there's a purely petty layer, because Khonshu seems petty AF. So I think he likes it because he knows he can use that as a cudgel against Mark. And then also, I think if he did have Layla as his avatar, he could probably use that. Like he could probably play that, like do the inverse of that, is use that as a cudgel for Layla. And also, because they obviously still have feelings for each other, and now she has feelings on feelings. Because I don't think we're completely over Mark, and now we're like, oh my god, Steven, you smell like Mark. Oh my god, let's kiss. Which I mean, like honestly, girl, same. Like, also, I was like, yes, let me put the harness around your crotch. Like, I can't wait to read that fanfic. And then, so I think there's a manipulative, like just purely interpersonal manipulative aspect from Khonshu's point of view. But I also, it was, as you were talking, I was thinking like, I honestly think Layla's the best of both Mark and Steven in a way, because she has all the knowledge, and her father was an archaeologist, and she knows this, and she's actually Egyptian, it seems. And she has like a tether to the land that Mark doesn't necessarily have, or Steven has. And then she can fight. Like the girl, she, like she said, I don't need protection. She's incredibly capable. And then and Khonshu would just enhance that with the suit. So I think he's obviously, I think again, my theory is that he was in a pinch, he was in a bind, saw Mark, hopped in, and then was like, wait, actually,
You're
Layla,
better.
yeah, wait, you have a little less baggage. Like, let me just hop on over. But then again, I also think there's like a manipulative aspect where he can kind of play the two against each other. Because again, I know he has a form of vengeance, but I do think he's the petty king.
That's fair. That's fair. And I just want to see that play out, and I want to see what's going on with that. And then also want to see play out the relationship between Layla and all of Mark or Steven's personality. I don't even know how to refer to
I
them,
think it's a
their
system.
personality.
I think you're supposed to call it a system.
A
That's what I
system?
was
Okay,
hearing. Yeah,
to their
they're the
system.
system. Yeah,
Because obviously she's only familiar with Mark,
yeah.
and she clearly cares about him. I would too. I don't blame you. Like, I see the appeal, I get it. I get it. And so then, but also here's this other side of, Mark, who's kinder and, more honest and just, very appreciative of her, and he's like, I would never divorce you when he said that.
Oh my god! And then in episode 3, when she's like, when he's putting together the map, and she's like, Steven, and it's just like several seconds of hard eyes, and I'm just, huh. And I mean, it's an ideal Sitch. He looks exactly like her ex, but with a kinder personality and a British accent. Like, who? Huh,
It's a
ideal.
win-win. It's a win-win. So,
Yeah,
and
no,
it'll be interesting to see what happens with that relationship with Leia, the system, and when we get introduced to Jake.
yes, he
So
wants it.
yeah, I really want to see how that'll play out. I think this is interesting. I think we could definitely see this going into like a second season and not just like a limited series.
From your lips to Kevin Feige's ears. My God. And yeah, and I also think I would love that. I'm down. I'm ready. I'm here. I'll bring people coffee on it. Anything to make it happen. And then I'm also really interesting, like just to quickly piggyback off of what you were just saying. I'm interested to see how they bring, like, how comic accurate, quote unquote, Jake is to compared to his comic counterpart, like, and because Stephen Grant in the comics is a billionaire, but they changed him because they wanted him to be more of like this Stephen in the show. What they wanted him to not be so much like a Batman dupe in a way,
I
and
was
I
gonna say, I
love.
was like, that sounded very Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, exactly. So they wanted to differentiate, and I love what they did with it. Like, again, I think everyone's like, this. I think I saw something on Tumblr today or yesterday that was like someone's already selling like Steven Protection Squad merch. So
Oh, that is Logan Art Chicago.
okay, so it was on your Instagram, excuse me. So
It is
yes, okay.
amazing.
It's great. And I think like that was an amazing like shift that they made, and also like very narratively smart, right? Because he's like Mark's the brawn in a way, and Steven's the brains. And Mark seems pretty comically accurate, and I love that he's from Illinois, because there was a moment in episode 1 where he says bag in a very, my mother's family's from the Midwest. I'm like, yes, Chicago, yes, dialect. And so it's interesting, like Steven's a departure from the comics. Mark's pretty closely adhering. Even Layla is taken, she's different, but she is taken from a character named Marlene in the comics. And she's very, like, the fact that Mark had a hand in killing her father, who was an archaeologist, again, that tracks. So I'm very interested to see how much of the Jake alter they keep as like a taxi driver, and how much they adapt and kind of shift for the show. And I want it, and I want it now. Like, open up the coffin, Tawaret, like, you hippo queen goddess. Like, come on. I want 3.
Let's do this. Let's get the boys back in action.
We've been so spoiled. I was so spoiled with 3 Spider-Mans that now I want 3 Moon Knights, Oscar Isaacs.
That would be amazing. I do want to see a group hug again, because if we don't get to see the
Oh,
inside of that working, and because seriously, like, I felt like I was healed when I saw them hug. Like, they were so happy to see each other. They're like, okay,
yes!
we're not dead. We're not like losing our minds. Like, okay, this is
Or we
happening.
are, but we're here together.
We're here together. We're gonna go down together. And like, what is so interesting to me is the jealousy too between, like, when Steven kisses her and he's like, I'm gonna throw us
Yes.
off the cliff.
No, and then Mark punches him. That was great. That was amazing. I was into it. I was like,
But really, Oscar Isaac, like, he kills. It's like, just the acting range alone. Like,
yeah.
I think he's play against yourself. It's
So brilliant.
truly some of the best acting I've seen. Definitely the
Oh,
best acting I've seen in Marvel. Like it's just
it's
phenomenal.
utter it's just utterly brilliant. Yeah, and then like the specificity with both, like his face changes and you're like, "What?" And even no matter how it changes, even when he's possessed by Khonshu, I'm like, still would bang.
I saw a TikTok and I think I sent it to you.
Yes,
I'll
of the
link it in the
thirst
show
for
notes.
Khonshu.
Where this young woman, I think her name is Mariah, and she says, what are the bags under your eyes? Are they designer? And I was just like, yeah, even the bags under his eyes are amazing.
Yeah, I'll take it. It's fine. I'm a big skincare freak, so I got some good little patches, some caffeine. I'll get that fixed up right away.
But it's really great to see like the TikTok reactions to the
Yes.
series, the way that people are just, simping for Mark and for Steven, and just, it's exciting. It's so exciting. And I can't
Oh,
wait to see all the TikToks once this episode 4 drops, which by
yeah.
the time this episode airs, everybody will have seen it.
Yes.
So bring on the TikToks. Please tag
Yes.
Temple of Geek and all your TikToks so I can
Yes.
see them all.
Yes. I know. Oh my God. Poor, like, Monica will send me like 3 TikToks and I will respond with 18 memes. It's bad. I have 2 friends. Monica has one of the 2 people who I just spam their phone. Like I just am like, and this one, and this one, and this one. I think so far my favorite meme is Steven, or it's like Conchu when Steven's in control of the body, and it's that meme video of like a big bird kicking the door in, and I'm just like, this is I remember I saw it and I almost like spit my drink out. It was so good.
And you mentioned earlier today, like the horror element. That
Yes.
scene where Layla gets taken back into the cave, I was like, no,
Yes.
no. I was so stressed out. And I'm
Oh,
not a big horror person. I'm not like somebody who likes scary stuff. But I
yeah.
was so stressed. I was like, they did not hurt my girl.
No,
Like,
perfect meme.
no. But something that I thought was really, really cool and really, really interesting was that she got out of that situation on her own.
Yes.
And that's something you don't usually see. Like I was actually waiting for Moon Knight in the suit or whatever. I know
Yeah. He doesn't have it
he
technically right
doesn't
now.
have it, but I was waiting for something to come save her. And then she saved herself, and I was like, have I been conditioned to think that a man has to come save this girl? Like,
Yeah.
and I really had this moment of like, oh my god, like why would I assume, like, obviously clearly she needs no protection. They've said that from like the get-go. She's the one who's been rescuing Mark this whole time, or
Yeah.
Steven. And so I don't know, like it was just a moment where I was like, oh, I really like this. She got out of it herself, and
Yes, I love that they're a team in this. And it's like,
yeah.
yes, Mark, Steven, Conchu, Moon Knight are the protagonists. But I love that Layla, again, is not a damsel in distress. And there's also really interesting, like, meatiness to their relationship. It's broken and it's fractured, and now she's having feelings for another one of his alters. And it's not just like, oh my God, you punched the bad guy. Which, because, like, that's me. You don't need that in the show because I'm on my couch being like, oh my God, you punched the bad guy. But no, I think I love it. I think it is. You're right. It's like moving things ahead where she can take care of herself. They work together. They balance each other out. And also, it's interesting. They're an estranged couple, which I don't really feel like I've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe the way we have in this one. Like the only other couple that comes to mind, and she's not as big of a um, factor, is Judy Greer and Paul Rudd in Ant Man.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was like, just the Wasp, but even then, like you said, she's not a big factor in it in that
No,
way. Um, yeah, this is definitely a different relationship than I've seen
yeah,
altogether. Obviously, like there is that him trying to protect her and him trying to go on his own, like that
yeah,
trope where, he's doing it on his own. But the fact that Steven is like, no, no, here's the truth. I'm just going to tell you everything you deserve to know. It almost like balances that trope, right?
It is, and
Like,
I think they're self-aware of it too. Like in the beginning of episode 4, when she's like, "He's just gonna try to lone wolf it," I'm like, "Yes, drag him, BB, like drag that fine ass like to it." Which also, I like, yeah, the butt has been great. Sorry, I'm a very intense critic, very
and so,
intellectual.
and then another thing that I think is, super great about Moon Knight is the comedy in this show.
Yes,
The physical comedy too has been so
yes,
great. But like, there's the scene where he is running through, like, he's running from, those dogs that Harrow
yeah, the
sent after
jackals,
him.
yeah,
Yeah, he's running in the museum, and just the way he runs is hilarious. Like when he falls, when they're like about to, you know, jump down into like the cave where like the tomb is and everything, and he falls and he hurts himself in front of Layla. He's like, "Oh, I wish you hadn't seen that." But like, even when you were talking about the back and forth he has with, with Harrow, and he's just like, no, he's like, you don't have to do this, or he's just like
yeah.
the audience voice. It is so funny. Oscar Isaac is so hilarious.
So good. I think also the other scene that comes to mind is when they're rewatching the footage back at the museum, and the guy's like, "Are you crying?" And he's like, "A little bit, yeah." Like, it's so, and because it's honest. Like, how would you not be like fearing for your life in that? And I also love, oh my god, the moment in this last episode, in episode 4, when he's like, "Oh my god, like what if they all came to life right now? I'd shit my pants. That'd be so cool." I'm like, yeah, chef's kiss. And I think it's great. Like, I think that's something else I love about the series is, yes, this is very, it just feels like they're blending genres in a really cool way. Like, yes, like nothing is all, and it's not too self-serious. It's not just like a straight action. And there is, I think it's an action adventure thing, but yeah, they're weaving in the horror, and they have this kind of comedic self-awareness that's so interesting, and it makes it so much fun to watch. And then there's also these beautiful, really genuine character moments. Like, I'm thinking of the moment, like the conversations Layla and Mark had on the boat and in the car in episode 3. Like, that's almost like you lift those scenes and forget about the weird moon Egyptian god, and that could be like from a kitchen sink drama. That could be Marriage Story. So,
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
that into that movie, but like, so I think it's really cool how, and it's the one thing I love about Marvel is that they have kind of, one criticism of this genre in these movies and TV shows and media is that it's a formula. But the thing I love about it is that, yeah, yes, it's formulaic in a sense, but they've gotten the formula down so well that now they're playing with it, and now they're making it trippy, and now they're subverting it when they can. And there's been other properties that have done that. None are coming to mind, but even like WandaVision, how they were playing, they're like, yes, XYZ, but now we're gonna also examining mental health. Like, now we're gonna do it through sitcom tropes,
Right.
and like write a love letter to those. And I just think it's been so incredibly interesting. And I like that, again, they're working in different genres, um, and just doing something really cool and different. And I think something else that I remember you and I, when we both had seen Eternals that we were talking about. I also just love that, like, we're not in New York. And I'm from the greater New York area. I'm from Jersey, and I don't get me wrong, I love New York, but it's just so fun to be in a different environment.
I think that, and like you said, we talked about that during Eternals, like seeing different landscapes, seeing different like cultures represented, seeing different things. It's just so refreshing. It's just so nice. And
Yeah.
I think that that is a testament to Marvel moving forward with more inclusivity. We have
Yeah.
the first Arab director to release a Marvel project was on Moon Knight, Mohamed Diab. We have Oscar Isaac, who's from Guatemala, May
Yeah.
Kalamawi, I think.
Sure.
I'm so sorry if I said her name wrong. Who plays Layla? She's Egyptian Palestinian. I think that just it's a credit to Marvel that they've moved into a direction where they're bringing in more inclusivity both on screen, behind screen, and
Mhm.
it is translating beautifully. Like,
Yes.
it is just so, I loved the London scenes. I love the Egypt scenes. It is so nice to see something that's not, like you said, in New York, not based in the US, and just to see people who look different too. It's just, oh,
Yes.
it's all so nice.
Yeah, and I think that also what I love about that is and it's not like tokenism either. It's not like, and
Right.
here is our one colored friend. And it's like, and we had a Arab director direct one episode. Like it feels like, and it's kind of, it folds into what we were talking about with the mental health aspect. Is they're really taking it seriously, and they're very much here to tell a story that's authentic and not exploitative, which I love. Um, and yeah, I think honestly, and it's great too because I don't think you can say that these people, like, yes, they're being included, but they're also just so wonderful in their own right. Like, this series is so well shot. Like, Mohammed Diab is crushing it. It's brilliantly shot. I was just thinking of like how much fun and how cool, like especially in this past episode with all the caves, like the production design is so much fun. And then yes, um, Oscar Isaac is Guatemalan. I think he's Guatemalan and Cuban.
Yes.
He's Latino, but he's like obviously this brilliant effing actor. And the actress May who plays Layla too is again like inclusive, actually from the Middle East or has that ancestry, that's her ethnicity. And it's just so lovely. And I know she's getting a lot, or her character's getting a lot of hate online because I think everyone wants Oscar for themselves, which
How dare they?
I know,
She
but like
too needs to be protected.
she too does need to be protected. I understand the impulse there, but nah. Um, so yes, it's like, yes, you can be like being inclusive. I think this also, like this movie in particular, because I thought Shang-Chi was great. Eternals, I know we enjoyed, but generally was not that well received. But I think Moon Knight is really crushing that you can be and Black Panther. It's like it feels like very similar to Black Panther to me, where it's like inclusivity only enhances the storytelling. It
Yep,
doesn't, it's
absolutely.
not something you have to include, and it's not like, it's not going to be to the story's detriment if you do it the right way. It's only going to make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And all that has to do with being having inclusivity behind the scenes. The
Yes.
people that are writing it, the people that are directing, the people that are shooting it. Like these little tiny things make such a difference.
Yes, it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. I just, again, I'm like, I don't want it to end. I forget who was texting me. Oh, I think it was my other friend who I subject to many a Moon Knight meme. She's like, wait, this is only, she's like, oh, I didn't realize it was only 6 episodes. I was like, yeah, I'm really depressed about it. I need like 8 to 10 because
Yeah,
it's so brilliant.
I get it. You know, you don't want to do too much. You don't want to like overdo it, and you want to
Yeah.
tell your story cohesively and as
Yes.
best possible. So fine. But for Moon Knight, I think I really need a season two. I don't know.
Yes.
The world building in Moon Knight, like you said,
Yes.
I could see all the other gods. I would like
Yes.
to see what happens with Layla and, you know,
Yeah.
what she ends up involved in, you know, and like, you know, there's so much building on, you know, he could be fighting gods, all kinds of Egyptian gods for like 4 or 5 more seasons, you know, at
Give it to
least.
me. She wants it. Yes. Also, I think like you raise a good point too. Like we're in this new pocket, in this new corner of the Marvel universe. I'm like, no, give me some. I'm enjoying it. I want some more time here. But then I totally understand leaving the audience wanting more. But yes, like you said, there's so many different avenues to go down with this. This is like feels like the horizon is so wide on this one. And also, I think it also speaks to the creative team and how brilliantly they're portraying the system of in Moon Knight, rather, should we say? Because like I want more time with Mark. I want more time with Steven. I want more time with presumably Jake. I want more time with Hippo Goddess. Like I and Layla. Like I want more time with everyone. I want to go back to Donna. I know we saw her for a second, but like I just,
Oh, sorry.
yes,
Who is he talking to on the phone?
I have no effing clue.
Who is he talking to? Because
Okay,
Layla mentions a thing, and this is
okay.
why I feel like I need more time. Because Layla
Yeah,
was like, "Oh, you're talking to your mother again," and he's leaving voicemails to supposedly his mother.
I
So, like,
just had a
what
thought.
is happening? I need more time. I need answers.
Okay. So the two theories I've heard is that Mark set it up because Mark knows about Steven. So he's leaving voicemails for Mark. And then Mark sends him postcards because, again, in the beginning, Steven did not know about Mark, but Mark knew about Steven. The other thing I heard is kind of like a more out there theory. I think it's when we knew less about Amit was maybe it's Amit because he always signs off later as Gators, and Amit has the head of a crocodile. But you know what just occurred to me having this discussion is maybe it's Tolerant because she's the goddess of protection. I don't
Maybe.
know. ITK. I don't know, but that's a good question. I don't know who it is because, and it's not Layla because she was like, I hadn't heard from you. Is it just a burner phone in that storage locker? I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. And like,
I,
also, I do. There is another altar because who asked out the girl at the museum?
yeah, I was thinking that that might have been Jake.
Me too. And that's why I'm like, I want to see him. Also, it's just like it speaks to Oscar Isaac's performance, which we really haven't spoken at all to it. But let me take this opportunity. Just kidding. This is just two simps going off. But I think it just speaks to his performance because I'm like, no, I want to see what Jake like. I want to see how like Jake's movement and how he speaks and like his whole POV. Like I'm like, give it to
What is
me.
his Moon Knight outfit gonna look
Yeah,
like? Because we see Mark
exactly.
Spector has the whole hooded thing.
Mr. Knight. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have Mr. Knight. Oh my god.
It's so good. It's so good. I
So
just
I
need it
want to
all.
see if there's gonna be like a third suit, because
Yeah,
that
I
would
want.
just be perfect in my opinion, is having a third suit.
Yeah,
Just reflecting of all the different personalities, but we'll
I
see.
need it, and I need it bad. I need it
So
now.
so before we wrap up, um, any last thoughts?
God, I have so many. I know we're gonna sign off, and like I'm gonna have 14 come to mind. I just think I think I hope I feels like the general consensus is everyone was just so pleasantly surprised by this show. I completely echo you that we need more. I want season 2. I think it may help that Oscar Isaac's a producer on this. Um, and it seems like he enjoyed playing the character. That being said, he's like one of the most in-demand men in Hollywood. So there's always like, I there's what we want, and then there's like my cynical but knowing like the logistics and how hard it is to schedule people. Um, but I love this. I want more. I just also I really don't want it to have all been a dream. I hate that like like Wizard of Oz, great because she like learns from it, and but this one I'm like this cannot be the end. But I also think it's interesting because a lot of something else that everyone was bringing up is um Khonshu and Steven spinning the sky back. It was interesting because like what does that mean? Was that just a major event? And it's like now it's like okay, so now that our universe or our planet is just like 2000 years younger, and like does that mean Loki and Hela, and like what does that mean for the greater MCU?
So what I there was a really great take on that
Okay.
that I saw on TikTok. I think it was
Yeah.
Vegas Vagabond who says it, and I'll link it in the show notes so that people can watch it. But she describes, Khonshu's powers as being able to because he's from this, other dimension, this pocket
Yeah.
universe, that the way that he views Earth is in a different perspective. So, for example, it would be equivalent to the way that we view video games, right?
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
we can play a game, we can interact, we can watch it, but also it's kind of like just seeing something on the internet. He didn't really affect the actual stars and the moon. He just kind of rewind and
Yeah.
went back so we could catch something in the
Yeah.
same.
Which
Yeah, he just did a playback for like a minute, but from our perspective as lowly humans, we just saw like an event, but it didn't actually move the stars or anything, because had that happened, the catastrophes on Earth would be
mad.
unimaginable. Like what would happen to our waves and our ocean and
Yeah.
our planet and
Tides.
things like that. Um, so that's not what he did, but from our perspective it looked like that, but from his it was more like just going through your web browser and
Yeah.
looking for something,
Yeah.
and he did it for a moment, but it was enough that it's going to wake up the gods like, hey,
Yeah.
you were not supposed to access that.
Exactly. And that's what I hope it is, because I know a lot of people were like, what did he do? And I'm like, no. And that's kind of what my original thought was. Then also, again, this is not what I want to be, but like, does it even matter? Because was this all in their head?
I really hope it's not in their head. I think it would be a
No.
disservice to the conversations that we've been having,
I mean, that's a good
you
point.
know. Um, so I really don't want it to be that. I don't think it'll be that. I think that they're a little bit more thoughtful about it. But I think that the whole everything happening in his head is them trying to explain to us what is going on in his mind, how he's
Yeah.
processing it, and you know, how he's dealing with it internally and what's going
Yeah.
on in his mind. Something that we can't possibly see, you know.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. They're externalizing like this internal battle and struggle, which I love. I'm into it. I love it. Also, this is I don't know. I feel like I'm a middle schooler again, because I just like want to make a playlist for this show, like a vibes playlist. Because it's just like I'm thinking Ariana Grande in my head. I want the upbeat remix of Day and Night. I want like I had another
Not to
Ariana
mention
Grande.
just the songs that are already in the
Yes,
show. It has an excellent score. Like
it does. It does. I don't know. This is like the show's got me feeling some type of way. So I don't want it to end ever. Thank you, Oscar. Bye. Love you. Nina, keep taking it. Love
Feel
you.
free to
Bye.
send me your playlist.
Oh my god, I will. I
I didn't know
will.
that.
It's warning. It's a lot of Dua Lipa and Ariana Grande. You know, just
Just all in your feels.
Trey sophisticated. But anyway,
All right. Well, this is going to wrap up this episode of the Temple of Geek podcast. We want to thank everyone who tuned in today, but especially our guest, Victoria. Thank you so much for being with us today.
this was the most fun.
I love talking to you. It's always great to have you on the podcast. If
Likewise.
you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit us up on Facebook or Twitter using the handle Temple of Geek. If you want to check out some of our other episodes or shows, why don't you head on over to templeofgeek.com? There you will find all sorts of content that pertains to the world of geek.